Welcome back to the Chase MedSearch Podcast. My guest today is Peter Calabrese. Peter is a senior digital product program manager where he leads the strategy and launch of digital platforms supporting deep brain stimulation therapy. With nearly 2 decades in the medical device industry, Peter began his career in sales and built a substantial background in neuromodulation sales before transitioning into marketing and digital product leadership roles. His journey from territory manager to marketing director taught him how to bridge clinical insight, commercial strategy, and technology innovation. Today, he focuses on building connected digital ecosystems that help clinicians and patients get more out of therapy through data, design, and collaboration. Peter, welcome to the Chase MedSearch Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. Also very impressed that you were able to get through my title in one breath without having to take a step there. But no, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. It is a mouthful, but every word matters in that title.
Exactly.
I think.
You earn them. They're badges. I think by the end, after a couple of years, it'll be almost a full paragraph.
Absolutely. I have no doubt of that. So what is digital marketing and what does it mean that you're building connected digital ecosystems?
Sure. And it's funny, a lot of people think when they see digital marketing or even digital product marketing, they almost think of patient marketing. They think I work on websites or, direct to consumer and that kind of stuff. And that's not what it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a big part of our business. I think, you and I have spoke, we're seeing the space go and neuromodulation go there. Patients are more educated. But where I mostly focus is I'm kind of really that conduit between marketing and R&D, really focusing on data, because that's really the future as we're thinking not just in neuromod, but in MedTech overall. We saw it happen in general tech years ago. Everyone always talks about, what type of phone do you have, Apple or Google, and everyone is always willing to buy the phone. But it's really not the phone that makes these companies valuable. It's the data that the products acquire, how they're utilized both internally and externally, both for us as the customers. We get a better product because they learn from what we use, but the companies become better too, more efficient, more kind of within their own right, becoming more self-reliant upon the data that they're able to pull from their customers. And med device is now getting to that place too. There's been implants, there's been externals, there's been products used by patients and clinicians for years. And a lot of that data has been siloed on the devices and not really brought into this concept of a connected space. So it can benefit everyone from the end user to the patient. And the way we think about it is the benefit there is, from the PACU to the doctor's office. How can we take that patient journey and make it actionable to both the clinician to help get and deliver better patient outcomes, but also bring it to the patients to help them to be more informed, get better care, and be able to provide that information, to their clinician. So that's kind of what digital product marketing is versus, creating those direct to consumer places.
Yeah, this is coming up a lot in my work too, where I'm recruiting for some companies and I'm able to start saying to the reps, hey, if you're going to get an opportunity to sell software as a subscription as part of this, that is going to be massive in the future. It's big right now, in fact. And in talking with the CEO of a startup the other day, he said, yes, we manufacture implantable, programmable medical devices. At the end of the day, my vision is to transform this company into a data informatics company. The product is necessary, it's important, it's critical for, the disease state that we're treating, but at the end of the day, the data is what's really going to make this thing go.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And how we're seeing it utilized is, everyone is becoming more aware of the value of this data. The institutions are becoming smarter in the US. We've seen this, and I've had the experience of working in things in Europe and outside the United States. They've kind of gotten a little bit, more knowledgeable on this earlier of the value of the data that they're able to, contribute to outside organizations. And it's really who's going to be able to make that actionable first. And it's not just going to be how can we pull it off the device. It's how can we navigate the landscape on both the accessibility of that data through different types of consent, working through the contractual obligations, and also on the payer market too. We're seeing certain things from CMS, some of these also independent payer markets, Blue Cross, Aetna, those type of things. There's incentives now for institutions and clinicians to use things that have increased interoperability with third-party software. How are they becoming more efficient? Because that's really what it's coming down to is how can they get to the patient to the best outcome and the least amount of unnecessary visits, the least amount of time, also with reduced spend. And you're seeing this in cost effectiveness studies. And this was big in Europe for years, but we are starting to see it come more in the States.
Yeah, I know you've been heavily involved in AI at certain times in your career as well. How is AI incorporated in the work that you're doing now? And how is just the existence of AI changing the nature of the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. So it's growing. It's new. Really, as we work in certain things, companies are aware of the benefit, but also the risk of it. The tools that I use now, obviously the information we have is protected. So if we're using tools, sometimes they're more internally managed, don't really have the web searches on. And companies are aware of that because they want to keep the data, internal and safe, but they also want to make things actionable for, the employees there so they can get the most out of the work that they're doing. As we're seeing how AI starts to become in terms of output of how we're thinking of it in terms of the customers, there's what's delivered to the patient. And I had the benefit of working on tools that focused on things like recommendation engines. So patients can provide, smart nudges or little things that I used to like to call the handhold. We've known in neuromodulation for years, it was always no news was good news. And then the problem with that is the patients would come in across all disease states and you found out that maybe they weren't doing as well as you thought. And then it became multiple visits, maybe non-reimbursable visits for the clinician to get them to the desired outcome. Well, how can we provide that handhold to the patient without having to need someone to call them, without having them to come into the office? So that's where I know certain companies are starting to go for both the patient and the clinician. But it requires data, Jordan. And I think that's where a lot of companies are right now, is building that data lake, building that repository of data that can make it actionable. Because as you know, with the space that we're in, you kind of only have one chance to get that right. So I do give a lot of the companies credit. No one's really jumped out at this and kind of launched something right now that's front facing. This is an AI tool where you're starting to see little things start to be peppered in. But a lot of it, I think, is just building the kind of foundation and the infrastructure. So I think in the next couple of years, you are going to start to see those tools become more front-facing for both patients and clinicians.
Yeah.
But in terms of my everyday life, and I mean, I can even find some of these tools here, like I love leveraging AI. I have like these little desk assistants. I have it on the phone. I believe in on my personal life, in obviously being the most protected of my information. But I believe in it. It allows me to almost superpower what I can deliver. I talk fast. I drink a lot of coffee. I'm from the East Coast, so I'm used to kind of all the time. And AI allows me to do that at a speed even I used to not be capable of. So I think we're all starting to go there, but just doing it the right way, what's best for not just the company, for the patients, but also people need to be more aware of their data. I think we're all guilty of going through a EULA or going through an end license agreement on an app and not reading it and just agreeing to it. I mean, I'm guilty of it and I work on this stuff, but it's becoming to a point where we may need to start reading of what we're actually giving companies access to.
I almost feel like they make those obnoxiously long just so you won't read it. And
of course.
If there's a point in here, I'm never going to find it. So let's just sign it so I can get this app or whatever I need. But good point. You had 15 years in sales, including 8 in spinal cord stimulation and pain therapies before transitioning into marketing. First off, how did you get into sales just to begin with? And then how did you make your transition into medical device sales?
Yeah, sure. So for me, for school, I was always interested in medical. For me, I got exercise phys degree. I knew I wanted to do something in the medical field. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Got out of school, was dabbling. I, did an internship at a hospital working in the exercise phys department to kind of figure out in the rehab side, is that something that I wanted to do? But really was trying to find my place. Like most people, I think in like the early 2000s, I got into pharmaceutical because that was the boom. That's when all those companies, I remember being at, some of those headquarters and it felt like a college campus back then. I don't think we're going to see that most nowadays, but back then that's what it was. And it got me into pain early. And that's kind of where I got my excitement for pain. With that, I was in a car accident. I had some experience myself. So a little bit kind of personalized for me. I kind of was a pain patient. I was seeing my own clinician for some of my own issues. So I kind of found it interesting, and it kind of is how I started to dig into the different types of pain management that was out there. So I started out a pharmaceutical right out of college because they were hiring kids right out of school at that point to just build up their sales force. It allowed me to start to understand the medical sales space, make connections with clinicians. And that's a real big thing of any of this. It's, making sure you build those bonds, because you never know when they're going to deliver for something for the future. A couple of years in pharmaceutical, I met some really amazing, intelligent pain clinicians that made me aware of spinal cord stimulation. And this was during the boom of that time, and I immediately was gravitated towards it. It was something I found so exciting. And it took me from where pharmaceutical, I kind of felt like I was in the way. Even though I was in specialty pharmaceutical, I felt like I was in the way, wasn't providing the value that I wanted to. Whereas spinal cord stimulation, it allowed me to kind of be part of the continuum, to be valued by the office and not just there to drop off samples, or back in the day, being able to do things that are widely not accepted anymore, but wanted to actually do something to help patients. And did it for many years and loved doing it. I loved being in the OR. I loved helping people. I loved helping patients. And I really geeked out on it. I would read about it. I would read clinical studies on my free time. I don't have children, so it allowed me to do that. And just kept learning about it. And the thing that to me was the most exciting was almost the competitive nature of it, of learning of what other people were developing, what other systems were out there, what's going to be coming 5 years down the pike. And I just was very much self-taught. And as I was in sales for years, I had some amazing leaders on the marketing and R&D side who saw that they needed someone who had field experience to be able to launch products. Because you can teach marketing to a degree. You can teach product management. You can teach someone launch excellence. You can't teach someone almost a decade of experience carrying the bag, being in the OR, and knowing what the customers are looking for. So thankfully, I had an amazing leader at that time that was willing to give me an opportunity to come in and start working on launching a product that they were working on. And it was very much focused on making sure that we're delivering a product that meets the needs not just of the clinician, but meets the needs of the internal sales force. Because I think that's a customer that some companies sometimes forget about. Because if your sales force doesn't believe in the product, your doctor's really never going to hear about it. Mm-hmm. So I got that opportunity, and it kind of just grew from there. And I dove all in, started taking classes, learning on my own, and eventually became a people leader, took some individual contributor roles, and just genuinely love what I do.
Yeah. I want to go back to when you were still a rep in the field. You're doing well. Obviously, you're on the radar of people that matter in your organization. Some people in sales will never consider an in-house position because the pay cut is too big, and they know they're going to have to show up in a cubicle every day. What was so attractive about moving out of sales into marketing that was compelling enough that you made that move?
Yeah, I really wanted to be responsible for changing something and solving a problem. I love puzzles. I tell everybody all that time when they ask about my history and how I got into this. I love puzzles. You can't really see them from the bookshelf behind me, but I do have some little small gadgets that you have to solve, open, find the tool on the inside. And that was something that was really intriguing to me about getting into product marketing, product development, and R&D is you're doing that. You're given the problem of, we need to get access to this data point. Clinicians are having this issue with this tool. How do we get there with the resources we have to solve the problem? And it kind of scratched an itch in my brain, Jordan, that as much as I loved sales, I loved chasing the number and the things were exciting about it. I really liked the idea of being there to solve a problem. And I was getting that rush from when I saw it come to fruition. Like for me, having a sales rep or a doctor tell me that this thing that we designed really was exciting, they loved using it, started to become something I really, really was striving for.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I think... Well, I know offline you and I had talked about this being the number one question you often get from sales reps is, how do I do this? How does this happen? To maybe take a step back from that and say, who's the right person? Who's the right rep to think about making this transition? What sort of internal things do they need to be motivated by? What do they need to be capable at and interested in doing? Because I think sometimes people just see that as the next rung on the ladder to get them to what they ultimately want, which is maybe becoming a manager, a sales manager, or something like that. And you weren't in it for that reason. So tell us more about what's the right profile of rep to make this kind of move when people are assessing it for themselves.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I do get that a good amount of times. Like I'll get some reps that call me up, maybe been in it for 10 years, 15 years, and be like, how did you do it? It wasn't easy. I mean, there was some sacrifices I had to make. First of all, I didn't mind coming to an office, points being hybrid, sometimes remote, sometimes having to be into the office. For me, it's also, being in the field. Where I excel, where I try to do is I also leverage some of my relationships of getting out there and asking very open questions. But for what you need to look for is what you need to do is you need to be fueled by wanting to see that long-term impact, because instead of those instant wins that you get, with closing the sale, being done, making sure that you close the customer, you have to think about it more strategically, and start to want to think that way and start to be, fueled for that, where you're more like enabling drivers and influencing decisions to really build something for the future. That's where you almost have to have that paradigm shift in how you're thinking if you're moving from sales to kind of want to get into this type of marketing role. And there's some people out there. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of amazing sales reps around the way that do start to see that and find their niche. But it is that change in thinking. You're not going to walk in and in a day be able to close something and get that gratification that you were as a salesperson. And some people have issues with that and may get bored or don't really enjoy being stuck in front of a screen all day, but it has its wins. And if you could see it down the tunnel, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Tell us about that first week when you go into a marketing position in-house. Did you feel like a fish out of water? Did you feel like, boy, there's a lot I don't know and I need to learn it very, very fast? Take us through that emotional kind of highs and lows you had.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a change in my overall kind of schedule and how I dealt with things. I'm an early riser. We live by the beach. I'm used to, back in the day, I used to try to go surfing in the morning. I don't do that as much or at all anymore. But it also got me to wake up early for the operating room, and that's what I was used to. I was still doing it. I gotta be honest, I still do it now, and just prepare for my day. The biggest thing that week outside of my change of schedule was learning processes, learning things that, are kind of institutional for being in this type of position. You have good people who help you learn those type of things. And then you find where you can either immediately start to learn stuff, whether it's on a product side, learning the benefit of a quality management system, understanding how to partner with your comm ops and sales ops partners to make good processes to get things out to the field. But then there's also things where, again, I had amazing leaders that helped me bring some new skill sets to myself that I didn't have, like how to properly leverage market research and how to structure research in a way to get the answers that you're looking for. And it was a learning thing that I had to do. I don't normally do that as a sales rep, didn't really have that. I'm not a classically trained marketer. I took courses and things afterwards, but I wanted to learn by doing. And you need some people to help you to understand, to make sure when you go into proper research that you're not thinking about that narrow scope, because I think you see companies do that sometimes. They go into some things and they want to hear the answer to a problem that they already want to solve, and they don't want to hear the answers that make them have to possibly go back to the drawing board, have to think a little bit deeper. But there's a benefit of that, because if it does set you back sometimes a little bit, it really comes to fruition as you get closer to launching something that you're focused on.
How much of an advantage was it that you had carried the bag for so long and so successfully as a rep? What were you bringing to the in-house team that maybe was a different perspective that was super valuable for them?
It was how they used the product. I had an amazing compliance leader that I worked with, and she was incredible to partner with, because she used to joke around and say, I used to know every way that someone would use it wrong or the way they're not supposed to before we even got it out to the field. And it was a way that if we were bringing something of hey, here's a tool that we're going to deliver to clinicians and reps, and we can allow them to send notes or do something in it like this. And I'd be like, someone's going to put something in there that could be a complaint and it's going to get audited and we're going to get in trouble or something along those lines. And she'd be like, you're right. Someone would do it that way. And that was just one part, because again, I always would tell people, when you think about what a sales rep is doing, sales reps that are good reps have that kind of that A personality. My goal is to get the sale done, do whatever I have to do to close the sale, and that's their main focus. So when you have things that could change their workflow, make it more difficult for them to get from the simplest solution from A to B, they're going to possibly do things you don't want them to do. So I always jokingly reference from the movie Jurassic Park where Jeff Goldblum goes like, nature finds a way. I say sales reps will find a way. They will. They're going to find a way that you don't want them to. And it's how can you find that sooner? Not just to make sure that they're not doing the wrong thing, but also to make sure that when they have the product in their hands, they're excited, they're engaged. They're bringing it to their customer like, you have to see this. This is something that I'm excited to show you. And that's where you get the win.
Yeah, that's great. Not to get too personal, how bad was the hit to your compensation package?
It wasn't easy. Initially, it was what, I was expecting, something. And I was warned, again, I had amazing leaders that brought me in and they told me like, could be a short-term hit. If you're able to do it, there's success for you here to grow. But I was open and transparent with them. I was like, I can take this hit for a certain period of time. I don't ever expect to be where I was at. I was one away from P Club the year before I moved out of the field. So I had an amazing year. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to move to marketing. So it was a huge shift that first year. You have to expect. Again, you're not carrying a number. And that's the hardest thing for some reps when they have to think about, well, I deserve this. I'm making this now. Yeah, because you're bringing food to the table. When you're there and you're more in a supportive role, you have to understand. Like they're not going to be able to give you some of the numbers that sales reps are making. Mm-hmm. But I've been able to get to a place where I'm happy that I made the decision. I'm compensated in a way that I feel is very, very fair and gets me up in the morning and I'm very excited about. But that initial hit, yeah, I felt it. Wasn't taking any fancy vacations that year and definitely wasn't buying a new car or anything that year.
Yeah. Was that the hardest part of the transition, or what would you say to someone that's looking at something like this? This is something you need to consider because this is going to be what I found to be the most difficult thing, and you might find it to be the most difficult thing.
For some people, that will be. And everyone has their own personal situation, Jordan.
Sure.
And some people, they need a certain amount of money. They have families, they have bills to pay. So some people, that could be it, and totally understand it. We all have our personal lives. Yeah. I was fortunate where I was able to do that for a period of time to take on a new experience. The other thing is you have to start thinking about as much as your narrow cosm of thinking. I always tell like sales reps sometimes it's, the my, me, mine syndrome. In my territory, I do this. My doctors want this. And that's what makes them amazing reps. That's what made me a good rep is I was thinking of what my customers need, what I need to be successful. You have to stop thinking locally and you have to start thinking more globally. You have to. Just because your clinic would want it that way or you as a rep would want it that way, you have to start thinking differently because not everyone's going to do it the way you would do it. As much as I love talking now and talking with my hands like every Italian from Jersey, New York, I've learned to listen more than talk. And that's a big thing that you have to do and process more. I had an amazing, amazing boss one time that taught me to take a step back, take a couple breaths and process things before I think of a solution. And that has been an amazing help for me as I've gone through. Because that is probably a challenge of the most reps. Like they're given a problem and they're thinking of how can I solve this right now so I can make the sale. Taking that step back, thinking how you can help everyone and also helping your company. That's the goal of an internal employee. You're helping the company make more sales, become more profitable, find more elegant solutions, come out with new innovations, thinking that way.
Yeah. Sales is pretty straightforward organizationally. There's clinical specialists, there's sales reps, there's regional sales managers who report to a director, and then there's the VP of sales. Marketing is a little less clear to folks on the outside of that organization. Can you kind of lay out for us how marketing hierarchy is typically structured in your experience?
I mean, it's different everywhere based on the organization. I've had the opportunity to do this at a few places now. I've always, and I'm probably one of the least qualified persons to answer that question because I have always had this kind of hybrid role where I've worked very closely with R&D and very closely with marketing. I always wear kind of like a dual hat. And I love it personally. I love working with my R&D counterparts and I love working on marketing as well. So I've been always a little bit different in that way. But I will say, as some salespeople start to come inside, the one place I could say where some people don't understand is the concept of upstream and downstream marketing. I remember when I first came in, I was like, well, upstream marketing must be the marketing that goes up into the company, and downstream marketing is what goes to the customer. I was like, that makes sense. Sure, that's what it is. And most people don't realize what that is. Whereas, downstream marketing is, you're really working less on product development and you're getting it ready to put it into the hands of the customer. You're really getting those claims ready. You're getting ready to polish up the brand, working with, your communications teams, your branding teams, getting it ready for prime time. Whereas upstream marketing, where I really enjoy being the most, is getting that, kind of problem statement from the customer and going back to the original statement I made of solving the puzzle, solving the problems. And that's really where marketing and R&D really start to kind of come together to solve the issues. And upstream is where I enjoy being. I've had the opportunity to work in downstream. I loved it. I've had the opportunity to launch campaigns, had an amazing team that reported to me and loved working with them, where we launched some amazing products. I may go back to downstream one day again. But upstream to me is really fun because I like solving those problems and solving those puzzles.
Yeah, and you're a modest guy, and you probably wouldn't mention that you won a big marketing award. Tell us about that. Take us through it, because you've turned out to have a real knack for marketing and this line of work.
So it was an innovation award. I commend my marketing leaders because they wanted to almost be like sales and hand out year-end awards with some prizes and a trophy. And again, that's where sometimes that sales brain of mine comes back and I was like, I'm going to win this. And I was like, I need that trophy again. I have that, that shelf of all of my P clubs and all the trophies that are there. I'm like, I'm going to get another one. So for me, what it was is where I started to build my specialty of where I am is thinking about software as a service solutions. There is a benefit now of where we are in our regulatory field. And hey, this may change, but you have solutions at your fingertips when you're in product marketing of thinking about the difference between a medical device versus software as a service. When you develop something that drives therapy, that really truly needs to go to the FDA, get CE mark, you're looking at, a year, sometimes 2 years before where that product can get into the hand of the customer, because there's, submissions, there's regulatory back and forth, there's proper documentation. But there is certain kind of, little nooks and crannies that you can go where software as a service may be able to solve your problem. You're not able to provide direct insights. You're not able to drive therapy. But what you can do is provide access to data that allows clinicians to make decisions more streamlined, faster. I always say MD stands for my decision. I said this right. MD stands for my decision, doc. You can put it wherever you want it. For the lead or the implant, I'm just here to support it. But that's kind of as you have to think about it for software as a service too. Like, how can we take that and do it, in a way that makes it so we don't have to go through the multi-year cadence of submitting this for regulatory approval. So I had the opportunity where there was a problem I had to, deliver, a digital tool where we had to get it out and didn't have the ability to go through a full regulatory submission and try to find a innovative way to get a product to our patients where we can deliver that digital solution without having to go through all of that, all the rigmarole of everything of going through FDA approval. And it was successful, and it was able to get us where we were able to get the product out in the timeline, and actually earlier than the timeline that we were expecting. And that was a fun problem. It really worked. Dealing with, mobile device management software, I don't think is fun for anyone, but I did learn a lot about it.
So any regrets? Anything that would ever say, I really want to go back into sales at this point in my career? Or are you saying full steam ahead with this marketing role?
That last P Club will always be something that chased me. I was one away, but I don't know. I mean, I was ready. I was definitely ready. Like I said, I was hitting my number. I had an amazing boss. He supported me in what I wanted to do. He knew that light was going out for me. And the benefit for me is I loved my customers, like hanging out with them every day. I still talk to some of them now as friends. You always joke around. You see these people more than you see your family sometimes. So it's hard to just, not talk to them anymore. You've become close. there is part of me sometimes that, I wish I was out there, because you do see some amazing technology. There's some great companies coming out in the space that are making such innovative and fun products that I personally now watch on the sidelines that I get excited for. You're seeing companies come out with solutions. There's things coming out for VNS. There's things coming out for all types of neuromod, where we're thinking outside of the norm of how can we help patients, that I sometimes do think like, man, I would love to sell that. Like, what an innovative way, to get into a space that would be brand new. And, that sometimes that startup bug that, I had to kind of get out there and be on the front lines, it's a fun experience. And that may be something I say to any rep, where big companies are amazing. You learn so much. But if you want to sometimes give yourself a new challenge, that startup world will teach you some things, because, you don't have that, those never-ending coffers of money that can support you. You have to think nimble. You have to be scrappy to get things done, both on the sales side and on the internal side. And it's a great experience. And I enjoyed that I did it. Will I go back someday? I don't know. But it is a great experience for everyone to do, maybe at least once in their career.
That's terrific. Well, we're going to wrap it up, Peter. Thank you for being on, Peter. Great conversation. Thank you for sharing with the audience the arc of your career,
sure,
and where it's going. And I mean, there's no downside yet. It's all up at this point.
I appreciate that.
Congratulations.
And I'm always happy. Anyone I know is always say, if you have any questions, just message me on LinkedIn. Always happy to talk to people. Always happy to make more connections, which I know you know the value of that too. I'll be always happy to make a new friend.
100%. Okay, one more question. Sorry, I'm going to let you go after this, but
okay,
one marketing book that was influential to you. Is there something out there that everybody, in your opinion, should read or know about? I know there's a million of them.
So maybe not a book, but maybe just like a way of thinking. And there's courses like I took. There's full year-long classes. There's weekend classes. But if you want to get into product design, you want to get into product marketing, I had the opportunity to get like even just like a slice of learning from, the Stanford biodesign course. And biodesign is an amazing way of thinking of how do you solve problems, thinking of product development. And it really did help change the way that I thought of solving that problem of, meeting the needs of the customer. And originally took a short course for just initial learning, and I have gone back and gotten books and dove deeper on it. But that school of thought has really, really helped me understand how to solve a problem for product development, and have recommended it to many people. Some of my direct reports, I've even offered, to help sponsor their be able to take some of those courses, because I do genuinely find it to be very valuable.
Okay. Great. I'm going to let you go. I sprang that one on you.